what causes someone to relapse? What are they thinking before they relapse, during the relapse, after the relapse? What do they need to do to get out of it? What can the family do? Those are all questions we're going to cover today. And you're lucky because we have an expert witness. You guys know I like to bring expert witnesses. Kyle from the YouTube channel Sober Dogs. He's going to be our expert witness today, and he has graciously agreed to let us pick his brain. And we're going to ask him all these questions from someone who's been there.
Thanks. I'm ready to testify.
All right. So I know there are a lot of things that cause relapse, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. What are the big main maybe categories of things you think people should look out for?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. For me, I kind of break it down into a couple, maybe two or three. It was like the classification of complacency combined with boredom, and then like traumatic event combined with not doing what I'm supposed to do. I don't know how that could be simplified necessarily, but those are, in my experience, two of the main things that happen within each of them is, branches out. But I think the boredom complacency is a big one. I've dealt with that in relapse because of that. And then the trauma, or it doesn't have to be trauma in the sense of like a major life-threatening event or death of a family member, but like loss of a job, loss of a relationship, anything like that, but not being prepared to deal with life's terms, as they always say, maybe meaning I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do the last month, and then boom, I get fired and shit, let's go out and do this because why not? Everything's going to crap right now.
The effort, that's what I call it.
Yep, exactly. The efforts. Yep.
I like that you say it's this plus this, because I say that a lot. It's kind of a formula. It's not one thing. It's when some things come together. And I love that you're saying that, right? It's if you have this in combination with this, that's dangerous, right?
Yeah, it's to me always a progressive thing, just like they say addiction is progressive, relapse and or recovery, whether it's trending in the right direction or wrong direction, is, progressive as well. Like I can tell you a time I relapsed, I was just about to hit a year, and my home group asked me to speak, and there was like people coming up to me like, hey, you're going to speak for your year. And it just was this complacency thing. The week prior, I'd say more than a week, maybe 2 or 3 weeks prior, I hit less meetings. I started calling my sponsor less. I had just gotten done with outpatient. So that was this 3 times a week thing that I was doing positive that I'm now done with. And in my mind, I graduated, I'm fixed, of addiction. So all these things combined, which unfortunately I think is very hard for the person themselves to see it happening in real time, which is, I'm sure we'll talk about why it's huge for like support and everything. All those combined, it was just this perfect storm of I got let go of work early one day. And I say let go, I don't mean fired. They just like, hey, you can go home early. We're dead. I had money in my pocket, which I didn't do prior. I got comfortable with that and had a whole weekend off, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, where I was like, I got nothing to do. I got money. Everything's going well. I can get high once.
Just once. Yeah. Yep. Just one time, last time.
Amber, let me tell you too, it was crazy. Like I had driving to this spot, I tipped my phone upside down because I knew if I saw it, I would want to call somebody positive, and I didn't want to do that. I was dead set on using once I made my mind up.
So you purposefully put your triggers away, your good triggers. Like, okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I had this whole plan out of how much money I'm going to spend, how long I'm going to do it, everything going, planned out for the whole night. Within, I would say 3 to 4 seconds of getting high, that entire plan was gone. It was not even, oh, you had this. It was like somebody used the thing in Men in Black and just wiped my brain. Yeah, I was going to say Matrix, Men in Black thing, and just I was gone, off to the races. I mean, within an hour, I'm back buying more. I'd made up my mind to use the next morning, so I wasn't sick. The next morning turned into the next night, and somehow I attribute it to somebody looking out for me, somebody higher up. Within 5 days, my mom caught me. Combination of that and just realizing what I was doing, I somehow it opened up and got back on track.
That brings me to a couple of questions I have for you. The first one is, because you were about to get your year, is what you said, because you're going to speak, or you were thinking about that. Let's say you're at a year or, whatever, almost 11 months, 20 days or something.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you have this relapse. Does that mean you start all the way over? What does that mean?
I don't think so. No. So that time, how I look at it too, and I know a lot of the recovery world, that time doesn't go away. That 11 months and 20 days that I was doing well, that's not all of a sudden gone. There was a lot of great things I did in that time, a lot of wonderful moments, rebuilding stuff with friends and family for sure. So that's still there. As far as a 12-step program that I work, it did physically mean that my date had to start over. Yes. But again, that year's not gone, that time that all those positive changes were made. And I know there's a lot of new thinking in the recovery world where they're not trying to put so much emphasis on the dates. I do, because I work a program that does emphasize that. And I also think it's kind of important. I mean, I think it's important to celebrate the milestones, and as well as to let other people know it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
If, everybody just said, I'm Bob and I'm clean, and you had no idea if Bob's on day 2 or 20 years, you kind of wouldn't. The reality is, exactly.
Let's not deny it. Right.
Exactly. So, but I don't think, I think the balance really comes in learning from it, not underestimating it or undermining it, learning from it and being serious about it. Holy crap, this happened. How did it happen? Why? What can I do different? But with that being said, not beating yourself up like, oh my God, screw it, everything's done. The efforts, like you said a minute ago.
Right, because the days, counting the days, it can be really helpful for a lot of people because it keeps them motivated, right?
Yep.
They get excited and they feel good about it.
Exactly.
It can lead you wrong in 2 ways. One is if you have a relapse, then you think, I've screwed it up, day 1 again, I start over, and that's not good thinking. And then also it's like, dude, I've been sober 18 months.
Yeah.
I can have a drink. And so then my next question for you, Kyle, was, you said your family or somebody noticed or kind of caught you or whatever. What did they say and do? And was it helpful or not helpful?
So Sunday afternoon, my mom walked in my room and sat down and said, what's going on? You either have something wrong and you got to go to the hospital, or you're using again. Because she knew, like, there's just no reason for me to act the way I was, as well as sleep, like from probably after day 5 or 6 into recovery, which she wasn't even around. I was in prison. There was no sleeping till noon or 1 o'clock anymore. Like, it just never happened, I
love that technique. I want to stop and say kudos to your mom. That's a good one. I'm going to call that multiple choice, because sometimes families want to say, have you been using? And I'm like, never ask that question, because there's only one answer to that, and that's no. Why would you ask me that? I can't believe it. And then you start arguing. But she gave you multiple choice, and I think on a brain perspective, literally, if someone gives you multiple choice, you got to pick one of the 2.
Yeah.
There's not going to be any, no, nothing's wrong with me, you're being crazy. Like, I kind of like
so
that
true.
technique. I'm going to put that in my arsenal of teaching families.
Okay.
The multiple choice.
I'll let her know too. I until you brought that up, never thought about it. Never thought about it that way. But yeah, and maybe it was how she phrased it, or, but I knew the gig was up at that point too. Like, I have a relationship with my parents, a good relationship with them, a great relationship with them. And something you always talk about in your videos is like not becoming the bad guy, not becoming punisher, and letting life and consequences happen. They, don't get me wrong, they did punish and stuff, but at this point in time, they had been involved enough and had done some programs for themselves they weren't trying to be the punishers or whatever. They were
in
trying
their own recovery.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so they were like disappointed and a little devastated and worried, but it wasn't like you're in trouble now. It was, what is going on? Something is clearly not right. And I admit, I said it right there. I was like, yeah, I have. And so they asked me point blank, what's the next step? What do we do? And I didn't necessarily know exactly. And the only thing I could think of was what had been working prior was going to my meetings and in 12-step program, which I had done 4 or 5 times a week, every week. So it was like, call my sponsor, tell him what happened. That's clearly the inevitable step for me. I guess for me, it was call my sponsor. He came over and actually sat down with me and my parents and broke it down pretty simply. Like, listen, yeah, the date starts over. Doesn't mean the last year went away. Get to a meeting. Let's go to a meeting right now. And I want you at the home group tomorrow night. And you're going to get up there and you're going to tell everyone, you're on your day 1 again. And he's like, it's part of it. And it was definitely a little humiliating to do that, especially when I'm supposed to talk for the year or whatever, but nobody judged me. Nobody said a thing. I got a dozen hugs after, and it was like pick right back up. What happened? And then after a week or so, he started, ask me questions about it. After giving me a little bit of time to like unwind and not beat myself up. And then it was, all right, so what happened the week prior? What happened 2 weeks prior? What happened that morning? What was everything going on that kind of led to this?
So that brings up a good point. Do you think it's important, because you said your dad said, oh, you're going to a meeting and you're going to tell it or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you think it's important for people to tell it? Maybe they've had a relapse, but no one knows it, or their family doesn't know it, or their sponsor doesn't know it, or whatever, or their counselor. Do you think it's important to tell it?
I do. And here's the reason why. I know it can be a little, I don't know if humiliating is the right word, but like defeating almost too. But having to carry that burden is one of those things of like, that is what, for somebody like myself, one of the biggest things that kept me using was holding in all the lies,
the secrets, the darkness.
Yep, exactly. And one of I was just telling somebody the other day, like one of my favorite gifts of recovery is not having to lie about anything. Like my parents come over my house and I don't have to clean any rooms up and hide paraffin. There's nothing. They could come over and be like, hey, we're going to stay at your house for a week. I'd be like, great. I don't have to lie where I'm going during the day, where I'm going at night. That to me is like one of the biggest gifts.
Yeah.
Because it got to a point where I would lie about stuff that doesn't even need to be lied about just because it became a second habit.
Right.
It's
a lot. It's a lot to carry, like you're saying. And I call it the tap dance. It's a lot of freaking work.
Yes.
Never mind that getting the drug and using it's a lot of work. You got all this whole other charade to keep up. It's freaking exhausting.
Yep.
Yeah.
And each lie spiders into more lies.
Yeah. And you got to tell this one to this person and that
exactly.
One to that person. Oh.
Yes.
It is much.
Exhausting. And then you feel so guilty that it's like, what is the one thing I know up to this point that relieves guilt? Very minor and very temporarily high. So that's what I'm going to do, because I feel so bad about just being a walking, talking ball of lies.
I'm sitting here thinking about when you said that about telling at the meeting. I'm thinking, about what it would have been like had you not told it and you would have spoke at the 1 year on the inside, what that would have done to you. Because I could imagine you would have felt, I just think that would have ate you up and you wouldn't have believed in yourself. I think any positive thing anybody ever said to you from that moment forward, you couldn't have accepted because you felt like it's all built on a lie or something.
Absolutely. I think I would have done one of two things. Well, they're both kind of the same thing. So I noticed in a guy, I was at a meeting the other night, a guy was saying this, and it was so funny because he was saying it as he was speaking, and you could go around the room and see a little bit. He said, when I'm doing the right thing and being honest, I walk into a meeting, a rehab, wherever, and I'm like, hey, and I'm friendly with everybody, and I sit down and I'm ready to go. When I am lying about something, I sit in the back, I avoid, I find ways not to go. And you could see certain people getting fidgety when he was saying that. And it's
like
not
being at church felt called out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I part of me is like, well, if that's where they're at, like, I don't want to judge them for it. They're still struggling and let them find their way. But the other part of me is like, he's dead accurate, because I would have either self-sabotaged to find another way to ruin that year, or just backed away for the next week or two until speaking, to where people are like, what happened, and would have canceled or something.
Like,
and
you
then
either sabotage the speaking or just sabotage the recovery further.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or just like detach so far because I felt so guilty that where's Kyle? He's not coming. And that would have inevitably led to more using at some point in time.
That's the thing about secret keeping. Any kind of big secret keeping pushes everybody and everything else away, because you can interact, you can put on the same show, say the same things, but inside you feel disconnected. And you start subconsciously backing up from family, friends, recovery friends, whatever, because you have this secret inside. And then you start feeling like, okay, now I'm just living this lie again or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And I know you feel almost like ostracized from the people around you that maybe are doing the right thing, and you could see it because, you feel less than of somehow they're doing it. I'm not, so I can't be near them, or I don't deserve it. Or, then that negative self-talk starts and it just doesn't Stop.
And then after a while, just to go real deep into psychology, after a while of that, being around other people makes you feel bad. So then you start projecting and being defensive. So then you start being internally angry at other people, right?
Yeah.
And you're defensive. So you feel bad, but you also sort of project that onto other people.
Exactly.
And they're saying things that are kind of hitting you wrong, but they don't even know it because you have this secret inside. And then you're mad at them, and you start pushing away and pushing away.
That's a great point. I didn't even think about that. Like they might just be talking about, your counselor's talking about relapse or something. And inside I'm getting pissed at her and defensive, like for no reason, when it's just the topic that is today's topic. And it's like, wow, that's a phenomenal point I didn't think about.
Right. So it just pushes you away, gets you completely by yourself. I like to say, addiction lives in the dark.
Yeah.
And there it is. It's in the feeding ground at that point.
What do you tell people if they come to you, so let's say similar situation, they had a year going well and they relapsed? How do you kind of guide them?
The thing I tell them is two things. If it really is like a relapse, and maybe it was like 5 days, like you said, or 1 day, if it goes on a month or two, people almost are psychologically all the way back to where they were. Like they kind of do lose their recovery thinking, right?
Yeah.
And it takes it's a lot harder to get them back. If it really is more of a shorter period, I call it a lapse and not a relapse. It's one of the things I do. And I tell them, if you had 11 months, 20 days, and you've been using 5 days, but you're sober today, now you have 11 months, 21 days. You don't count them 5 days. You don't get to count those. But as of today, you have 11 months, 21 days, right? In your own mind, because one of the things is I'm trying to damage control. I don't want the person to feel so bad that they just give up or they think I've already screwed it up now. Everyone's going to be mad at me anyway. Might as well make the best of this relapse. Don't waste my relapse. I don't want them to think that.
That's a good point. I like that a lot.
Yeah. And I do encourage them to tell, but they've already told me at that point if they're telling me. So that's good.
Yeah.
I don't make them tell their family. I don't tell them they have to go to their meeting and pick up a white chip or whatever. But I talk to them about the secret keeping and then they make their own choice.
Okay. I think when we were talking about should they tell their family, I think the answer is yes, but I also don't think that family's the first person that is necessarily, I always think too, like for me, the most important person at that point in time to tell was my sponsor and my addiction doctor. And then if even sometimes if a couple days or a week, tell my family, not in a situation like mine where they blatantly saw what was going on. But, and that's again, not a bad thing towards them, but my family doesn't get it. They're not, they don't get it. They're not an addiction counselor like you. They're not an addiction doctor and they're not addicts or alcoholics or anything themselves. So they immediately, sometimes I think in their brain, go to the worst. Oh my God, we're back to square one. 10 years of disaster is about to come our way. And that can be detrimental to both them and, the person. So I thought it was important to tell my sponsor first and kind of go from there, even though in my situation, they kind of, were onto it. But.
And you gotta think too, where your family's at in their own process. Like, can they handle hearing it? Each family's different. Some families that are working a good recovery program, they can tolerate it better.
Yeah.
And I guess one piece of advice, if you are going to go and tell your family, at some point you need to tell them. And so if you're going to tell them, then head it off at the pass. Say, I need to tell y'all I had a relapse last month. Here's what led to it. Here's what I've done about it. Like, I'm so upset. Because that's immediately, if you say I had a relapse, those are the questions they're going to be having.
Yeah.
How, why, when, what are you going to do about it? So just say it all.
Yeah. You kind of like hit what is it? Tackle the bull with the horns or hit it head on. Yeah. I like that a lot. Because that's what they're worried about it. Yeah. Is it still going on or is it going to happen again is kind of what they're worried about.
Exactly. So go ahead. And what they're going to be thinking and what they're going to ask. So go ahead and answer it.
Sure.
And you'll feel less attacked by them because they won't have all that to bombard you with.
Yeah.
And they'll feel better because they have the answer. So it kind of helps on both sides.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What is a person thinking? So let's say during your 5 days, what are you thinking during the 5 days?
It was the exact cartoon of the good angel, bad angel on your shoulders of once it got started and put in my system, that sets off a whole chain reaction of like that, the memories and the dopamine and all that. I mean, everything, all the chemicals. I'm sure there's a dozen other ones I don't know about, but set off to where the pleasure is through the roof as far as getting high, something I loved for years. But then it's like, what is going on? Oh my God, you're back to this. How can I keep this a lie? You can't, can you? And that unfortunately leads into more use, because once you start, those efforts start, and those, what can I do now? I can either stop and lie about this forever, or, oh my God, I feel so guilty, so bad. What am I going to tell people at the meeting? What am I going to tell work? What am I going to tell my parents? And I think I sometimes go to these extremes too. My brain was saying every night of those 5 days, tomorrow was the last time.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Yes.
Yeah. Tomorrow would be, but I did that for years during addiction. Tomorrow's it. Tomorrow's it. And there's this weird phenomenon where when you're high, there is this like problems are a lot less for some reason. It is this. I remember
you're under anesthesia. That's what I call
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't feel it the same. Right.
I mean, I remember sitting with buddies where like the 5 or 7 problems going on in each of our lives, we would sit there high as a kite, like, oh, it's all right. I could do this and I'm going to get this done and I could do this and take care of that. And like, it could be like, I owe like 50 grand in taxes, like a monster problem. And then the next morning, as soon as it wore off, I'd be like, what the F were you thinking last night that you could just solve it like that? Are you out of your mind? And the weight of it hits again. And it's, what can I do? Use to get rid of it, or to,
What's the most immediate fix to this overwhelming feeling or anxiety or problem?
Yeah, exactly. They call it in AA, a stomach full of beer and a head full of AA.
Right.
I knew what I was doing I shouldn't be doing, but I was doing it anyway because I couldn't stop.
It's like watching yourself from up here, narrating what's happening and knowing exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you think if, like, let's say the family, they do feel like the person's using, or they know the person's using or whatever, should they call them out? Like, should they say something? Like your mom chose to say something. Should they or should they not?
I think they should. I think they should I think they should, but it doesn't necessarily mean they have to go and confront them like just straight up. I think there's ways to do it without like extreme confrontation. I think if there is, let's say the person was coming to somebody like you, I think it's totally within reason and probably a positive way to do it too, is the family to reach out to you and do it together or figure out a game plan. So I think that, like in my parents' case, even though it worked out a little bit separate, but like my sponsor got involved, somebody with a solid, at that point, like 11 years of recovery and doing well and whatever the case was. So I think that can help dampen or make the person less defensive. By getting, quote, professional involved or somebody that they feel comfortable talking to. But I don't think there's anything wrong with doing it. Just, again, like you always say, don't go in as the bad guy. Go in with the care and concern and, lead them to how can we get you back on track.
Right. Don't be reactive. Don't go in like emotional. I will say one thing, because you're saying about tell the counselor. This is just my own public service announcement here. If you're going to tell a counselor, well, don't tell. People call and tell me, and then they say, but don't tell the person. So,
oh, yeah, no.
I hate that.
No way.
Because I'm like, okay, now you have a secret, and now I have a secret, and now I feel like I'm betraying my person, or now I'm playing games, and they're playing games. Ugh, I don't like
Why would they ever? That would drive me nuts.
Because they don't want the addicted person to be mad at them.
Yeah, and they don't want to start anything.
The thing of it is if they don't say something to the person, they can call me and they say, okay, this happened. I want you to know it, but don't tell them that you know. And I can't do anything with that. Now we're all game playing. Everybody's game playing again. And that's or they're like, okay, yeah, you can tell them that I told you. But if they haven't already told it and I tell them your mama called or your husband called and told me this, they're going to be so ticked off when they go home. And usually I try to be like, do not go home and do X, Y, and Z. But guess what they do?
Go home and do,
I can't, right. So it's leaving room to make you be the bad guy, even though you're trying so hard not to be the bad guy.
Yeah. Would you, so I guess where my brain was going with it was like, if they called you and were like, Amber, I know, Kyle's using, is there a way that us two can talk to him? I guess that's where my brain was going. Would you think that would be a proper approach?
That's actually a really good question, because a lot of times that happens when I go into my lobby if my person is sitting out there and their family member sitting with them, here's what my brain says. Oh, because I know, and and I didn't know that family member was coming. Like it wasn't like a planned together session.
Exactly.
It only means one thing. It means my person's in trouble.
Yep.
And I tell my clients, I said, let me tell you something. If you're going to show up and your mama or daddy or husband or sister's going to show up, you better give me a heads up so I can protect you because I'm like your lawyer. I don't like for that to happen because when that happens, the person I think feels humiliated. And it's like sitting at the principal's office and then your mama's telling on you to the principal. And then I'm trying to help the family member know that I hear their concern and I understand, but also protect my relationship with the person at the same time. And it's really hard to do both of those things.
Yeah.
So I don't really prefer that because if it has happened, I want to talk to the person by myself because I can do it better without them in there.
Okay.
Because they're going to, imagine you're sitting there, your mama's sitting with you, telling on you. I called Kyle, imagine what that feels like. And then
I'd be defensive the whole time. Yeah.
Right. And it's just maybe so.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah. So I try really hard not to let that happen. In fact, I sort of preempt it and teach people if this happens, don't do this. And a lot of times, even like when I get a new client or a new family, they want to bring the person with them or I'm like, no, I don't want to see you together because nobody's going to it's just going to make everybody on edge. So that's just my thoughts. Public service announcement.
Yeah.
That's for the counselors to help the counselor.
That sounds dead accurate.
Yeah. All right. What do you advise someone to do after a relapse, or maybe even if they're in it, how to get out of it? Like what's the steps out?
I would say, remember and revert back to whatever you did the first couple times or the first time, whether that was 12-step, an outpatient, an inpatient. Remember what got you to your recovery. And then again, back to what we were talking about a little bit ago, that balance of I think the key is stop, whatever you can do to stop using and get back on track. And then once you do that, don't kill yourself over this. Don't beat yourself up so much because I know we all do it. I do it incredibly. And learn from it, but don't beat yourself up so much. It happened, and then how can I avoid it again and get back on track, whatever that track is for you. And I think that how that would start with pretty much anybody would be open up to something. I think getting it off our chest is like one of the biggest things we could do. And that, at least in my experience and opinion, 99 times out of 100 is probably not a family member, so which it can be, doesn't mean it can't be, but for most people I know, open up to somebody and tell them. And just by doing that, I bet you'll feel better about it. And you'll be able to, hopefully get enough momentum and game plan something to get back on track.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that telling someone is a huge step because it's once you do that, you've made the decision to stop.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to tell you could tell someone and keep going, but it's a lot harder to do that, right? They don't have to do anything, just them knowing.
Yeah.
It's the magic, right? Yeah.
The only way I would think of it being that the other way is like if I just had to get it off my chest but didn't want to stop, I would tell another person who's using because I know they wouldn't try to stop me. Okay. They would just be like, oh, you had a year up to yesterday and you just relapsed? Wow, that sucks, man. Maybe if they're in, maybe they'll be like, you sure you want to do this again? But in the end, most users, unfortunately, and it's not because they're bad people, it's just their state of mind, are going to want somebody there using with them. So they're just going to be like, oh, that sucks. You had a year and you just relapsed, but you already did some, so you might as well do some more or screw it.
Do you think you could have stopped the one relapse you were telling about, Kyle? Do you think you could have stopped had your mom not confronted you? Like what would have happened had they not known or not called you out on it? What do you think would have happened? Obviously, you have to guess. But
so that day, I was in a really weird mood, even prior to her coming in. I think I wanted to get caught. So I think hopefully how it would have happened is within the next couple of days, her or my sponsor was already calling me like, where are you? It's been 5 days. You haven't called me. And he tells me to this day, I knew it. I've dealt with enough people to where when I go 5 days,
only ever means one thing.
Yeah. So, I think I hopefully would have gotten caught by either somebody in my family or him, or it could have even been parole or something like that at the time. But that was because I felt so bad and I really didn't want to be back using. I genuinely didn't. So That's how I think it would have played out. But then, if it could have been 3 days until something happened, and during that time, could have been an OD, could have been a parole violation, another 2 years back in prison. And if that would have happened, there could have been a very good chance of getting the FITs.
So to me, that's a good example of how you didn't have to hit a bottom, and how actually, if you had hit a bottom, it would have probably made it a lot worse.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I hit a little weird bottom the night before, so I attribute this as an overdose. I've overdosed in the regular sense of the fashion prior to this, but the night before, what I always did is I did heroin and cocaine together, and what I would do is I would do like 2 and 2 in each shot, but then the last one of the night would be just heroin to come down. And the last one I did was at like 2 a.m. I woke up at 9 a.m., like on my floor, passed out, needle still hanging out of my arm. So that's an overdose. I mean, 7 hours I went out. I didn't need Narcan or whatever, I don't know. But it just, that sent me into a, like, what are you doing? You're going to be dead tomorrow.
Right.
So I think I would have pushed to, get caught somehow, subconsciously.
You think the secret would have come out one way or the other.
Yeah.
I like to say you don't have to hit bottom. You just have to know you're going to. And I think in that moment, you're like, this was a bare miss right here.
Yep.
And I don't have any more of these.
Yeah.
Like near misses or whatever.
I like that a lot. You don't have to hit bottom. You just have to know you're going to.
Yeah, you just have to believe
it. That. Yeah. Very true.
Did. You believed it. And that was your recovery still at play, I think.
Yeah.
Like you knew it. So to me, your 100%. Recovery was still working even in that moment.
Yep. And that's what got right back on track. And I think that goes a lot to the programs too, of I genuinely liked and trusted. I was petrified to go back and admit I did what I did. But at the same time, I believed from the bottom of my heart they wouldn't judge me for it. They wouldn't be mad at me for it, which no one was. So I think that has to do with having like building up some good relationships and trust and faith and whatever some people's recovery program is. Because what they kept telling me for years of, we'll love you either way. Well, it was true. It proved to be dead accurate. Nobody was the opposite of what they preached.
You had a good foundation in place.
It was a little bit interesting too. I was thinking about the keeping it a secret part. So I obviously told my sponsor, my parents, all that. Everyone in my immediate circle knew. But because parole could have retroactively violated me, for the next 2 years, I had 2 sobriety dates. I had the one rehab and my sponsor, and the real one, and my online one, which was different to keep from parole. And then as soon as I got off parole, it was more than the next 2 years. It was like 3.5 years. Then I opened up when I got off parole and was like, yeah, it's a little bit different. I have 2 sobriety dates but I still think it was incredibly important that the people around me knew the truth.
Yes.
And I really do believe that even after a couple of weeks, if I would have I knew my parole officer at the time, he would not have violated me if I came and told him the truth and would see me right back on track. But I was so scared in case, or he puts it in the paperwork and he doesn't want to violate me and he sends it up the chain and his boss wants to. So, that was one little lie I had to but it wasn't really a lie. It was just, I have 2 dates. This is how I'm going to do it. I guess it's a lie. I'm justifying it. Yeah.
Okay, it's a little omission there.
But I told 5 or 6 people in my immediate circle the truth. So I got it out to some people.
If you would have been my client and said, hey, what do you think about this? I would have been like, yeah, I can co-sign that.
Yeah.
Right. Because I remember in your story, in another time we talked, you told me that there was a point that you had relapsed when you were on probation before, or parole before, and your parole person had told you, if you just come tell me, I won't violate you.
Yeah.
And he did.
Yep.
So you had an experience before that would definitely have made you thought like.
They're going to, yeah. Now, in his defense, So he told me that, and he said, if you come tell me the truth, I'll work with you and I won't violate you. So I did. And what he said, I came and I was like, I've been using. So he said, show me your arms. I did. And I had track marks everywhere and, fresh ones. And so he comes back in the office and he violates me and I'm effing him, what are you doing? You said you wouldn't. And so fast forward 6 months later, me, him, and my parents were talking and he goes, I just want you to know why I did what I did and went against my word. And I said, okay, go ahead. And he said, the week before you came in, I had another kid who came in and I promised him the same thing. I won't violate you if you tell me the truth. And I didn't. I had to pick his ankle bracelet up at the morgue a week later because he died. He said, seeing the amount of marks in your arms, I knew that was going to be you if I let you walk out that door. Right. So in a sense, he saved my life, even though he did retract his word, because he was right.
It was the right call in that situation. But I also understand why in the second situation why you would have been leery.
Built up some serious fear.
Yeah. Right, for sure.
Yeah.
Anything I didn't ask you, Kyle, about relapse that maybe I should have, or that might be important for people to know?
I just think that what we talked about in the very beginning about, I think with society, a lot of times we do assume and think relapse is going to be the trauma, the big event, which it absolutely can and will. But I think, of course, I have no idea of validating the statistic. It's just anecdotal, my opinion. But I think 50 to 50%, 50-50, it is. Things are going fine, or things are good. On the surface, things are okay. No firing from job, no traumatic event, no, family member death. It's just complacency, boredom, 2 or 3 triggers hit at the right time, and we're not doing the right thing the week before. So, and that's not to scare parents out there like, oh my God, now you're saying things can be going great and they're going to relapse. It's just to understand that it doesn't have to be anything traumatic like that. And that's the importance of, in my opinion, continuously working a program all the time.
Right.
Being in contact with those people in recovery and working whatever your program is to said people.
Because I think you make a great point with that, because we kind of know to have our guard up around bad events, right? And so our extra protections immediately come to place from our family, friends, ourselves. The problem happens when we just let our guard down, because we think that's what happens is we let our guard down.
Yeah, that's so true. Like a funeral or something, everyone's, you all right? You all right?
Like you guys.
Yeah. That is so true. And, Kyle, they're going to be drinking over there. Why don't you come over here with me? Everyone's like so nervous and worried. And then I am too. That's such a great point. Yeah.
One of the things I've noticed is that when a client relapses, the first thing they want to tell me is because this bad thing happened.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, okay, well, let's talk about it. But I think they feel like that it's supposed to be. Right? Like they're trying to make sense of it. And I say, okay, well, was it really that, or had you been thinking about it before that? Well, I had kind of been thinking that. And so we trace it back. But I almost feel like they feel like there has to be something that they can attach to.
Yeah. Right? Because we feel like something's wrong with us or our recovery then. How could I have just relapsed on a Monday with nothing going wrong? There must be a problem with me or my recovery, or I'm not good enough then. There's got to be a deeper trigger to it or a deeper event to it. That's a interesting concept too. That's so true. Yeah.
Most of the time, what I find it is, Kyle, and this is my experience from clients, is they started getting the thought in their head that they could manage it different this time. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's
I'll do it a
less
little
complicated than people think, right?
Yeah.
But getting that squirmy thought in there.
Yeah, when they say it happens, far ahead of actually picking up, though, I think that's 1,000% true. Typically relapse in my brain, and everyone I've talked to, it has started 2, 3, 4 weeks ahead of time in their brain before the day they physically pick up.
Right.
Sometimes even longer.
You're vulnerable. That's when the vulnerability starts.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kyle. You have shared a ton of wisdom with us. If you guys want to hear more from Kyle about this topic, he's got a great video out about relapse and triggers. And I think it's called something like, "This is just how quickly a trigger can happen to you, can sneak up on you." I will link that in the description and in the comments below. And Kyle's YouTube channel is called Sober Dogs. You guys should check him out. He's got a lot of wisdom, a lot of stories to tell, and a lot of recovery to share.
Thank you so much for having me on, Amber.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.